like to stand and join us in a recitation of the Lord's Prayer, followed by a moment of silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. It is now 7 o'clock. The City Council meeting is called to order. Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Be seated, please. Roll call, please, Mr. Crump.
Mr. Robb. Here. Mr. Roberts. Here. Mr. Cutler. Here. Mr. Martin.
Present.
Mr. Welk. Here.
I will now entertain the motion to dispense with the reading of the journal from May 20th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Martin to dispense with the reading of the journal from May 20, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts. Yay. Mr. Cutler. Yay. Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin. Yay. Mr. Robb.
Yay.
That motion passes. We now come to the time for public comment. If anyone has a comment to make before council this evening, you're invited to come to the podium and state your name, address, and your comment to council. We do have an invited guest on the public comment, Mr. Aaron Billheimer. He's here. He is a local beekeeper and an expert on bee care, and this will give us a good, I guess, a component of our Bee City education, as he'll be answering some questions, and maybe have any other questions concerning the arena of bee and pollinators and everything else in Shelby. So, Mr. Billheimer.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Billheimer, if you didn't know that already. I am a beekeeper of 5 years, and I have the Fan Cave Shop downtown. Honeybees are the bread and butter of what makes all plants, pollinators, not just honeybees, but all pollinators for fruits, vegetables, and pretty much everything we eat. They're very important. They're the most active in this region. It'd be probably around April till about the end of August, September. Just kind of depends on the season. This year was a little bit different since we had a mild winter. They were kind of active all winter. Bees don't actually hibernate, but they go into a conservative mode once it gets cold. And the warmer it is, the more active they are, and more honey stores they use or whatever we might have to supplement to try to keep them through the winter. They are most active between sunrise to sunset. A lot of times we'll move our bees either before daybreak or close to sunset where it's about dark. And right now it'd be about 9:30, probably 9:45 before we can move some bees. Bees orient to the spot that they are in, and if you move them during the day, you're going to have bees coming back that are confused. They don't know where their hive's at, and they might get accepted into another hive or whatever. But at night, with them all at home in the hive, that allows us to move them to different locations. They come out the next morning and they're like, okay, they reorient to where they are, which is pretty amazing. They come out and they just kind of do circles around the hive and go up and up and up and up. They might go back into the hive, or they might go out and forage. And that's how they orient themselves. They can go, we talked just a little bit before, about 3 to 5 miles from the hive. And somehow they know where they're going and how to get back. It's pretty amazing creatures. Some of the threats and dangers for the honeybees are the varroa mite, which they call it varroa destructor. It was introduced in this country around 1980-ish, and you have to treat for them. Some people go with a non-treatment method, and over all these since the 80s, they've started breeding genetically, trying to get these bees to where they call them ankle biters, where they'll actually kind of chew the mites off of each other. But the number one killer are the mites and the diseases that the mites create within the hive. The bees are, individual insects, but act as one. And in the process where they're growing in their comb, is where the mites actually will breed in. And so that's the number one threat to the bees. And then second would be our pesticides and some other things, colony collapse, where the bees just disappear. And they still don't really have 100% reason why that happens. I mean, they've got theories to it. But the best statistic I could find was from April of 22 to 23. They had about a 48% loss countrywide, 48% colony loss. Now, as big of a number as that is, one of the things that, bees do basically two things. They reproduce and make honey. They pollinate and that kind of stuff too, but the two biggest things are that. And if you have good honeybee management from beekeepers, then they're able to actually recover those numbers by creating new hives and producing queens to do that. They artificially inseminate queens, which is a process within itself that just boggles my mind. But as part of that recovery that they have every year, and actually before I came to the meeting, I was doing a little bit of just double checking my facts and whatnot. And in 24, so far, I guess we're up. You get people publish all sorts of different stuff. We won't know until next year because they have to consolidate all that information. But an interesting thing that I just learned about a week ago, part of the Richland Area Beekeeper Association, and we have meetings once a month. What is it? I forget what day it is. But anyway, we had a gentleman from ATI Worcester that was talking about pesticides and the active ingredients versus the non-active ingredients and what it's doing to pollinators as far as in the almond fields in California. And interestingly enough, give or take a few, but like 95% of the nation's bees, the entire nation's bees, are in California from like January to March for the almond pollination. And it's millions of hives. And the demand is so high that they've started bringing in bees from other countries. Australia was the one that was named, and then that, unfortunately, by bringing in from other countries, creates new diseases that we have to deal with and learn about and train and all that stuff to keep our hives alive. Fortunately, here in Shelby, we do get bees from all over, but we're sheltered, as we are a lot of things in small towns. And I'm sure there's a lot of other small towns that have that situation. But it's all something that, trickles down over the years, and we have to learn how to treat these things and whatnot. So different things that we can do to help sustain the honeybee population is, reduce the pesticides, the herbicides, that kind of thing. Plant those that are planting flower beds and that kind of stuff. In towns, quite a bit different than, out of town. You get fields of soybeans. There's certain varieties of soybeans the honeybees will go after, and you got white clover fields and that kind of stuff. But in town, like sunflowers, black-eyed Susans, bee balm, clover, apple trees, all helps. And they all bloom and flower in different parts of the season that will help. Right now, I was caught by surprise just a little bit because we were having such, with the rain and the heat, the flowers were blooming, the bees were packing away the honey, everything was looking good, building a new comb. And now I got bees that are trying to rob other beehives out because they're weaker hives, they're stronger hives, survival of the fittest, that's just the way it is. Beekeeping, depending on what kind of a beekeeper you want to be, if you're just a hobbyist or if you want to start working towards a commercial end of it or selling honey, it all depends on what you want to do for what it's going to cost to do, beekeeping. And not just money cost, but a time cost. For me, with the hives that we have out by the wastewater treatment plant, 2 years ago, I came through the winter with one hive made it through the winter. And the following year, during that year, I had built up to 12 hives, got through the winter, I lost a few, I might have had like 7 or 8 hives, built it up to 24 the next year, and then came through the winter this year with no losses, to my surprise, and because I had some really young hives going into the winter. And part of that might have been the mild winter we had, and just, I'm getting better as we learn, or luck, could be too. But this year so far, with the way things have went, I'm up to 47 hives, and I've given 7 away. So they've been doing pretty well out there. Yeah. So just to actually start, if you wanted to start with just one hive and bees and whatnot, you're probably looking at about, depending on where you get your equipment from, but you're probably looking at a 300 to 400 range for one hive and the bees. The bees themselves, if you get a package of bees, which they just shake into a container and then they give you a queen to dump into your hive to start it all, you're looking anywhere from $150 to $185 a bee package. So it does cost a little bit. And as you learn how to sustain your hives, how to create queens, how to do splits, which is taking frames from one hive into another and creating another hive and whatnot, it does help with the cost of not having to continually buy bees. The biggest investment that you would want to do is just in more equipment, and as you learn to sustain things better, the money that you might put into the bees if you can't keep them alive or you don't have the time to take care of them, you can put into that equipment, and it actually it helps sustain itself over a long period of time. As far as if you encounter a swarm of honeybees, you could call a beekeeper if you know him. We've got a list with the Richland Area Beekeeper Association of different beekeepers that we're kind of on call if there's a swarm. Also, your pest control folks, a lot of times connected with the club, or just in general have a list of beekeepers to call. If that doesn't work, you can call your fire department or your police department, and they hopefully have a list of beekeepers or whatever that they can get a hold of. It might be the same, or it might be a variety of different people. We just had one here in town that unfortunately they had to actually exterminate it. It was in the right above the door going right into the building, and it was something we could have done an extraction for, but it was a pretty nice house, and the only way we could have got to it was cutting through the wall on the inside. and the inside was pretty nice.
Oh,
So as we were contemplating that, the tenant had came out and said that she'd already sprayed the bees, and at that point, you don't know if the queen's dead, you don't know what bees are dead in there. So I just had to tell the exterminator what happened and explain to them, and they had to take care of that, unfortunately. I've gotten several swarms this year. My most prolific swarms come from the Awake Church. Pastor Rita over there and her husband have a couple hives, and they don't want it to grow, and they're happy with how many they have, and they'll cast off swarms that go there. So every year I'm getting swarms over there. That's pretty fun. But different places around town, and I've actually was in Bucyrus the other day to get one, and it was actually too high for me to get. So now I'm looking into a bucket truck, but we'll go from there. Do I get stung? Do you get stung very often when keeping bees? It depends on how you're keeping the bees and the temperament of the hive. Each hive has a different personality, from docile, and it also depends on the time of the year. This time of year, or I should say when the nectar flow is going, that time of year, they're not too bad. This time of year they could be a little more agitated because there's no nectar, and they're now protecting the hive from intruders, other bees, whatnot. I've had hives before that I've gotten through all my hives. The last hive I get to is a little cantankerous and sting right through my gloves or whatever. And depending on where you get stung, depends on how it hurts. I got stung in the end of the pinky and I thought I was going to die. I've got stung in my wrist before and it's not hurt that much. But I would say generally through a year I might get a dozen times stung or so. It's not, the longer you go, you get used to it a little bit more and whatnot. So our bees out at the wastewater treatment plant, I say our bees because I want to thank the city for allowing me to be part of the Bee City USA with the part that I play, and having some good land and area to raise these bees. Like I said, this year we're at 47. I've had a goal for 50 for quite a while, and I'll be making that goal plus some probably this year. Running into an issue with keeping up with them and having all the woodware and that kind of thing to be able to keep up with the room that they're taking. Part of our goals has been to get to 50, and then there's been a lot of question of what's next. And actually, after hearing the gentleman from ATI Worcester talking about the commercial beekeepers and that kind of stuff and what they do, and that sounded kind of fun to me. So now I have to get them up to maybe 100 or 200 hives. And then hopefully here in a couple of years, our Shelby bees will be headed out to California to pollinate almonds. That's 2-3 years probably. That's a goal I'm trying to shoot for, unless something major happens and we lose our population. But it's been looking pretty good so far. Every year is an increase. So beekeeping across Richland County, it's been a couple of years since I've seen the map, but Richland County at that time was one of the top counties for bee population. Now, part of that too is you have, every spring, you have to register with the state for where you're going to be keeping your bees. And I can't remember if you had to put how many hives you had or not. But there are way more people than you would guess that are keeping bees and don't register. So when I mentioned that number of 95%-ish of the nation's bees are in California during that time, I'm sure there's several percent of margin of error of those that don't have their bees actually registered. We're in a unique situation right now here in Richland County where we don't have a bee inspector. There was a gal down in Columbus that was a state inspector that just had retired, and they have a new gentleman in there. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of direction happens now. But there's several counties that don't have an actual bee inspector. And part of what the bee inspector does is if you have a number of hives and you're trying to sell queens or you're trying to sell hives, they come in and they check to make sure that your hives are disease-free, that you've got your varroa mites and the hive beetles and all that stuff under control, and that it's safe. It's just part of the control to help with the health of the bees nationwide. So that's going to be interesting to see, if they're able to get somebody this year for that, because it leaves a lot of these people that sell their bees kind of in limbo for, we need inspected, we need, what are we going to do? So there are quite a bit to beekeeping as far as learning, and just every year you're gaining more knowledge for, oh, here's a new problem that I found, what do I do about that, And part of my enjoyment too is that I've helped a couple first-year beekeepers this year get started. And so being able to go through and show them, the things that I've learned over the years and help them not run into some of the problems, like just keeping your smoker lit. Might not sound like that difficult of a thing, but there is a process to it so it doesn't go out when you finally get into your hive and you go, oh, no smoke, and they're going pretty crazy around. So,
Well, that's been very interesting, and thank you so much, Mr. Gilheimer, for coming. And you all know a lot more now, don't you, than you did about 10 minutes ago. So we appreciate you and all the efforts that you put forth
Sure.
in the hives out at the wastewater treatment.
And thank you guys.
That's a lot of work, so we appreciate that. And thank you for coming tonight, and we're glad to have a resident bee expert within the city of Shelby's limits. All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, Mr. McGraw.
we'd like to talk to you and have more questions. When are you down at your business?
Our hours are 10 to 6 weekdays and 10 to 2 on Saturday. Yeah.
All right, thanks again. All right. Most interesting. We'll go now to reports from standing and special committees. Economic and Development Committee, Councilman Cotton.
Yes, the Community Economic Development Committee met Friday, May 31st at 2 p.m. A few things to note here. Farmers Market starts this coming Saturday. We've got new trash cans going in downtown. There's currently down at the Commons there. And they also plan on putting some, I think, eventually on Main Street too to match. So that'll be real nice. We got the Concert in the Park series coming up here soon, so we all look forward to that. There's some problems with the splash pad. I just found out about. Apparently, it's not draining correctly, and they kind of put a little deadline on hopefully having it done by July 1st. There, on getting that fixed, so the splash pad's up and going for bicycle days. So hopefully they can get that done. Let's see, there might be a job creation tax credit ordinance coming to council in the near future. This is something similar to what Ontario and Mansfield already have in place and has been in place for a while. So hopefully that'll get some more information on that here soon. There is a online survey with the Richland County Regional Planning website for Long Range Transportation Plan. So I encourage anyone that hasn't taken that survey to please do so. And also, they're still working on the strategic planning report. There's a lot of information to compile, so it'll probably be a while before we see that come to council. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Cudlip. Are there any comments or questions from Mr. Cudlip in regard to his report? Thank you very much for a good, concise report. Public Works and General Operations Committee, Councilmember Robb.
The committee met on the 28th and discussed a number of topics, first of which are a number of charter amendments that you see on the agenda tonight. Those are to kind of bring everything in line with today, kind of bring that all up to speed and also help get us in line with the County Board of Elections as far as some of the time limits and whatnot. It's summertime and once again mowing season. Mr. Dean advised he'd given a number of mowing cards and out, and on reinspection he's found that about 75% of the properties that he left cards for had been mowed, which is up significantly from prior years. We have Wi-Fi at the pool now, and it's kind of a family-oriented thing. A lot of sites are locked out, so it's not really wide open. There's some money left in the sidewalk fund from last year, and we had a discussion on how to distribute that, and came to the conclusion the best way to deal with that is continue the list from last year until those funds are expended. And if you drove out East Main Street, you see at near the corporation limit out there, there's been some dirt work going on, and Mr. Geis advises us that there are 5 double residences going into that area. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Rob. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Rob in regard to his report? Hearing none, we'll move forward then to the parking committee met. Councilman Roberts.
We also met on the 28th, and the legislation is done, and I looked over it again today. I don't see any issues with it right now. I'm not done looking over it, but on the meeting on June 17th, we will start to see that legislation. There's a lot of it, so we're not going to see it all at once. It's going to be kind of prorated out over, a couple months, so that we can. It's just, if we try to do it all at once, it'd be overwhelming. We'd have a 4-hour meeting, and we don't want that. So we're going to do it progressively, and we will get it all done, and it will help us out with our parking situation.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Roberts in regard to his report? Mr. Martin.
So, I know, it's my understanding there's obviously an abundance of legislation that's coming. I think it's all pretty much written, right? We're just going to be releasing it in chunks. But is there a way to put it into, we've paid for the online drive that we all have availability to. Is there a way to put all that legislation out there so that we can go out there and look at it in advance to offer up amendments to the committee before we get the final packages? So then we're not spending a lot of time with simple edits. We're spending time on more substantive changes.
Yes. Chief, get that to all the council members.
I think he's talking about putting on OneDrive.
Yep.
So I'll have to see how that's been implemented with Joe and Centec, but as long as that's implemented and available, we can do it.
Mr. Martin.
Because I know we should have all got licenses for the full OneDrive. We discussed this during appropriations. So we should all have, as council members, full access to OneDrive, including Word, Excel, the whole 9 yards. So that should be in place. And if it's not, then we need to, that's another thing, maybe the clerk.
One way or another, we can get.
I'll work through all those logistics.
We'll get the information to you. Right. Very good. All right, with that, we'll move forward to reports of city officials. The mayor's report for the past couple of weeks have been occupied with typical mayoral duties, a few days of R&R mixed in between. Last Monday, Shelby residents once again were blessed with a colorful Memorial Day parade and a meaningful ceremony at Oakland Cemetery. I want to say a big thank you to Linda Feaster and all of the participants and volunteers that made this another memorable day in Shelby. On May the 29th, I attended the Mansfield meeting of the Richland County Regional Planning Commission along with Councilmember McLaughlin and Mr. Joe Geis. Later that day, I was pleased to join other public officials at the dedication ribbon cutting of the Ritter's Runs Apartments on Ohio Street in Mansfield. The Area Agency on Aging is to be commended for the completion of this much-needed project. We all know that housing is a big need in the city of Mansfield and all of Richland County. On Thursday, the 30th, an impressive crowd joined together in this facility to celebrate Officer Keith Swisher's retirement from the Shelby Police Department. We're so grateful for Officer Swisher's 23 years of exceptional and dedicated service as a peace officer, school resource officer, and a DARE instructor. It was truly missed across this city and school hallways. And that is my report. I also have an appointment for your consideration to the Shade Tree Commission. Mr. Martin.
Move to confirm the appointment of Mary Crothers Hooks to the Shade Tree Commission to fill an unexpired term ending 12/31/2026.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts to confirm the appointment of Mary Carruthers Hooks to the Shade Tree Commission to fill an expired term ending 12/31/26. Discussion. Mr. Cutler.
Yeah, I would just like to take the opportunity to thank Mary Ann Hawk for all her years of service to the Shade Tree Commission. Her knowledge on trees is invaluable. She will dearly be missed on the board, on the commission. But Mary has some big shoes to fill, and I'm quite confident that she can complete that task.
Well said, and thank you for bringing that up. We'll miss Mary Ann around the table, but I'm sure she'll be keeping an eye on things from her vantage point. But yes, truly a very knowledgeable and dedicated woman. Was she? Any further discussion? Mr. Martin.
To piggyback on that, I think that it would be good to probably do a resolution of some sort to honor her service to the city of Shelby. I think the length of service and what she brought to the table is certainly worthy of such a.
Glad to bring that to the table. All right, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts. Mr. Cutler.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Rob.
Yay.
That motion to confirm passes. Now come to Mr. Crum, Director of Finance.
Thank you, sir. Typical duties this time of year. Our GAAP financials were submitted to the state timely. It was May 29th. So the audit does continue. I know that they sent out a letter. They are progressing very well this year. I think that letter is probably, I think the time frame was maybe the end of September or something. But I think that's probably based on more prior years than how things are going this year. So I'm hopeful that we will get that audit finished up earlier. I know they certainly want to. And our process of switching bank accounts has commenced. Special thanks to Deputy Director Cutlip over there, who has had the brunt of that. She's been doing a fabulous job getting things switched over. That really is all I have to report, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Crum in regard to his report? I'll move forward to Mr. Gordon Eister, Law Director.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a report as law director or as acting mayor in your absence. Things quiet.
I'm happy to hear that. Mr. Geis is enjoying some R&R here this evening. Any new business to be brought before council this evening? Any new business to be brought before council? Seeing none, move for unfinished business, as we do customarily from time to time, the future use of the Main Street Fire Station. It still has use, a number of things being stored there from the fire department itself at this point, so it still has municipal use. And then there are unfinished business. Let's move forward into legislation, Mr. Brown.
Ordinance number 8, 2024, amending section 260.10 vacations of chapter 260, employees generally of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby.
Move third reading.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts for the third reading of ordinance number 8, 2024. Discussion? Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. This isn't really a substantive change as much as a practical change. We do have an employee that will be coming on board the 24th of June. And so it would be good to have this in place for their first day. It would certainly make it a lot cleaner a transition than having to wait the customary time. So at this time, I would like to, I'm going to make this pretty short, amend the ordinance with all the accoutrements to make it an emergency ordinance. So, and everything that's involved with that. Changing of the title, making the 2/3 instead of majority, and then changing section 4. And I believe you've written that out for us as well. What that
I think
section.
you're the only one that has it, if you want to read that.
So, I'll just give it to the clerk. We're all familiar with the emergency language, so I don't think it's necessary to read that in its entirety. Although if someone on council would love me to read it, I can, of course, indulge
I
them.
want to hear your voice. Was there a second to that?
No, sorry.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Cutler to amend ordinance number 8, 2024 to make it adding the words "and declaring an emergency," and then the difference between a simple majority to a 2/3 majority. And also then section 4 would reflect that this is deemed to be an emergency to make available the advanced accrual rate as described above. And that language will be given to, we'll give one to our law director and also one to the director of finance. Are there any questions of that motion to amend? All right, we'll take a vote on the motion to amend declaring an emergency for this piece of legislation and all the verbiage that goes with it. Roll call, please, Mr. Crum, on that motion to amend.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutler.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Okay?
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
The motion to amend passes. Discussion on the motion itself, on the legislation itself. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutler.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
The third reading, ordinance number 8, 2024 passes. Mr. Martin?
Move for the passage of the ordinance as an emergency.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of ordinance number 8, 2024 in emergency format. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutler.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 8, 2024 passes as an emergency.
Ordinance number 9, 2024, proposing an amendment to section 7 of the charter of the city of Shelby and submitting such proposed amendment to the electors.
Move the first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Martin for the first reading of ordinance number 9, 2024. Discussion. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. This is I guess, a culmination of both previous and past. As Mr. Gates had mentioned, some things could possibly need a tweak and change, and these are being brought for us. So that about sums it up. This first one simply addresses the well, the not great timing of when it's on the 1st of January, having to have swearing in and council meetings and stuff like that. So moving that, every other holiday on the calendar that we have, we meet the subsequent meeting. But because this is by charter, we have to meet on the 1st of January if it indeed coincides with the first Monday. So this makes an accommodation, and I think pretty common sensely so.
Yes, and just as I may, as Mr. Martin has said, when you get down to the section that's being amended, you'll see the strikeout, and then in all caps, I'm sure you've noticed that all caps is what the proposed language that you put before the voters is to amend the charter that way, Mr. Martin.
Now, my one question I have, and of course we have a couple more readings, but is that the actual, how the language will read in the ballot with those strikeouts as well?
I do not know. We'll find out.
Because I know that when we've done this before in first and second readings, we'll have strikeouts, whatever, for ease, but when it comes to the third reading, those strikeouts are all removed and we're voting on what's actually there, because we can't have that as the final form of passage. I was just wondering if this is actually what the voters will see.
We'll find that out at the next meeting. Good question. Any further discussion? On the first reading, ordinance number 9, 2024. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutlip.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay?
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 9, 2024 passes its first reading.
Ordinance number 10, 2024, proposing an amendment to section 24 of the charter of the city of Shelby and submitting such proposed amendment to the electors.
First reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Robb for the first reading of ordinance number 10, 2024. Discussion? Mr. Martin.
This changes the, we used to have at 12 o'clock noon, this basically sets it to where it happens the first day of January. One thing I would like us to look to, we don't need to have this debate this week, but for the second reading, I understand the want to have non-gendered language. However, the way this is worded is very wonky indeed. Following an election, which election, so it's replacing the his with an and a. I don't know if that's the correct way to have gender neutral language that actually makes sense for this. So something to be thinking about going into the second reading.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutlip.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 10, 2024 passes its first reading.
Ordinance number 11, 2024, proposing an amendment to section 31 of the charter of the city of Shelby and submitting such proposed amendment to the electors.
Move for first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Robb for the first reading of ordinance number 11, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutlip.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 11, 2024 passes its first reading.
Ordinance number 12, 2024, proposing an amendment to section 36 of the charter of the city of Shelby and submitting such proposed amendment to the electors.
Move for first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Robb for the first reading, ordinance number 12, 2024. Discussion? Mr. Martin.
I do have another kind of overarching thing, and I'm assuming this has already been worked out, but all these are essentially addressing the exact same issue amongst these offices. Does it really break the single issue rule to have these all into one charter amendment?
I yield to
That's
the
been
Lord.
reviewed, and this is the way to do it. I understand, appreciate, and wish we could do it otherwise.
Be a lot of amendments on the.
We gotta separate the issues, the election.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yay.
Mr. Cutler.
Yay.
Mr. Martin.
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yay.
Mr. Rob.
Yay.
Ordinance number 12, 2024 passes its first reading.
Ordinance number 13, 2024, proposing an amendment to section 53 of the charter of the city of Shelby and submitting such proposed amendment to the electors.
Move first reading.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rob and a second by Mr. McLaughlin for the first reading, of ordinance number 13, 2024. Discussion? Mr. McLaughlin.
Back in 2014, the Ohio Revised Code section was changed requiring candidates for office to file the petition 90 days prior to the election instead of 75. And our city charter requires 75 days. And so at our last council meeting, we have representatives from the Board of Elections, Jane Zimmerman, Matt Fenthiel, and Bill Freytag, here speaking on that issue. And they would like our support in changing this to help everything come together on the same day. We're the only government entity in Richland County that is out of sync, that has 75 days versus everybody else is 90. And so basically, what this will do, all nominating petitions shall be signed, filed, and verified in each candidate's declaration to qualify if nominated and elected shall be filed and verified in the manner prescribed by state law at least 90 days versus 75 prior to the date of holding such primary election. So it only moves it 2 weeks, basically 15 days.
And that changes in the fifth line up, am I correct? I think there was the 90 in bold print, or all caps.
Yes.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor, throwing pins around here. I appreciate them coming to our council meeting, but I was completely unpersuaded by their arguments. They didn't, besides conformity, they didn't actually provide a reason why the citizens of Shelby should have a different timeline. As I have long stated, we have pretty early primaries here in Ohio, and to have somebody forcing someone to think about whether they're going to run for office in November, October, before the year the election even takes place, which if it's a March deadline, they have to have their petitions in by December, limits the pool of who can run for these offices. And I don't know that that is a good enough reason. It's all about trade-offs, but I don't know if that trade-off is worth conformity. And the other reasons they gave, they simply don't pass muster. And how do we know they don't pass muster is that the situation that we have in Ohio, where the nominating convention is happening for the Democrats after the deadline. And so the state legislature is moving the deadline for the general election to 60 days before the general election, and they've actually done that several times. So we can get all the ballots and everything pushed 60 days prior to an election, but 75 days prior to a primary, that is a bridge too far. It doesn't make sense to me. And even when they were here, I asked them point blank, it's like, you know, have we ran up against the deadline? Have we been like, oh, wow, we barely got Shelby's ballots on. It was 2 days prior. And they just talked about, well, there was one where all the ballots were thrown out. Well, that had nothing to do with our deadline. That happened countywide. Everyone was facing the exact same issue. They didn't answer those fundamental questions. I am completely opposed to this. I don't see, I'm not presented with evidence or logic besides simple conformity. Yes, they have 90 days, we have 75 days. I don't know, and we haven't been presented with evidence where, frankly, that's our problem. And so I'm completely opposed to this. I'll be voting against it. And if fellow members of council agree, I'll be urging citizens to vote against it as well when it comes to the November ballot.
Councilman McLaughlin.
Again, it's only a 2-week change. It's gonna help the Board of Elections to help us with our elections.
Mr. Roberts.
I agree with Councilman Walker, Councilman Martin. You know, they couldn't give us a reason why. You know, I don't think that 15 days helps them out this, you know, like they said it would, with their answers. You know, he point blank asked, you know, have you come up against it? And they talked around the question. So, you know, I'm gonna vote against this also.
Mr. Rob.
The purpose of this piece of legislation was to bring it to the table for discussion. And I think we've had some pretty good discussion on it here.
Mr. Martin.
I will say, Mayor, customarily speaking, we give things a first reading. Even if we, unless it's a very, very hard line on it, we give it a first reading so we can deliberate, so there can be, you know, further discussions. As such, I'm inclined to give this a first reading, but that is due to customary only. I do plan on voting for final passage of this, probably unless there's, again, I'm giving one final opportunity for people to provide me good evidence of why we should have to conform to the way other things do. Because here's the fundamental thing. You have all these different jurisdictions giving things to the Board of Elections, and they're all coming in. We're the only one that's 75 days. Well, that's not an argument for doing this. It's an argument against it. Because everyone else is bringing their stuff in 90 days. They can start taking care of Belleville, and they can start taking care of Lexington and Ontario and all this, because all this stuff that has to be done, like they rattled off. Well, by the time they actually get all that stuff done, then they can focus on the ballots actually go before Shelby. I just don't see where, again, we need to go through the hoops of changing our charter to be conformist in this stance. But like I said, customarily, I'm willing to give it a first reading, and you know, as is the custom of this chamber, and we can go from there.
Mr. McLaughlin.
I'd like to ask the council to give it a first reading, and maybe at the second reading, we'll get the Board of Elections folks back in here to talk to us.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay?
Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah.
Mr. Rob?
Nay.
Ordinance number 13, 2024 fails.
No, it passed. Passed its first reading.
I think it has to be,
It's
that's a 2/3 majority. That's a 2/3 majority.
That's
It
correct.
fails, a 2/3 majority fails.
Good pass.
Ordinance number 14, 2024, amending sections 216.02, card type, limits, and eligibility, 216.03, card usage limitations and procedures, and 216.11, card security and tracking of Chapter 216, credit card policy of the codified ordinances of the city of Shelby and declaring an emergency.
Move that the rule requiring that ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin, a second by Mr. Roberts, that the rule requiring that ordinance be read on 3 separate occasions be suspended. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts? Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah.
Mr. Rob?
Yay.
That motion to suspend passes.
Move the ordinance be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin, a second by Mr. Roberts for the passage of ordinance number 14, 2024. Discussion. Mr. Cutler.
Why are we taking this up as an emergency?
Mr. Mayor?
And section 4 usually explains deemed to be emergency so as to immediately implement the security and conduit controls. And Mr. Crum may have more,
Thank you. Yes, it's,
or elaborate on that.
yes, thank you. Yeah, we have, I guess, take a step back, we created this policy in 2021, we got one credit card. Throughout the last few years, we've sort of looked at our policies, like, okay, well, this doesn't work well in practice, this can be done to make it more secure. And so that's where these come in. The reason to pass it as an emergency is the bank has offered to give us credit cards for each department instead of just having one. And so we have those cards, we've not used them yet. And so we'd like to pass it by emergency so that we can just get this started as quickly as possible because we feel it's better practice.
That makes sense.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yeah.
Ordinance number 14, 2024 passes.
Resolution number 23, 2024, authorizing the mayor as Director of Public Service to enter into a contract change order with Helston, Inc. for the Seneca Wyandotte Sanitary Sewer Project in the amount of $15,652 as an increase and declaring an emergency.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Cutler for the passage of resolution number 23, 2024. Discussion. I believe Mr. Geis has sent out an explanation for the change. Any discussion?
This is standard changeover, it looks like.
Mr. Insman is here, but if anyone has any questions, it's pretty well self-explanatory. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yeah.
Resolution number 23, 2024 passes.
Resolution number 24, 2024, declaring the amount of taxes that may be raised by levy at the maximum rate authorized by law without a vote of the electors to be insufficient and declaring the necessity of a levy in excess of such rate for the general operation of the Shelby City Health Department in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Sections 5705.19, 5705.191, and 5705.26.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Martin for the passage of resolution number 24, 2024. Discussion? It is that time of year. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yay.
Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yeah.
Resolution number 24, 2024 passes.
Resolution number 25, 2024, declaring the amount of taxes that may be raised by levy at the maximum rate authorized by law without a vote of the electors to be insufficient, and declaring the necessity of a levy in excess of such rate for the general operation of the Shelby Board of Park Commissioners in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Sections 5705.19, 5705.191, and 5705.
Move the resolution be taken up and passed.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Roberts and a second by Mr. Cutler for the passage of resolution number 25, 2024. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah.
Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Yeah.
Resolution number 25, 2024 passes. We now come to miscellaneous business. Is there any miscellaneous business that we brought before council this evening? Mr. Martin?
Mayor, I don't know actually what the best way to do this, I know we're all eager to get out of here, but I would ask, I would move that we go into a 5-minute recess, and I can explain that once we get to that part.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. Roberts to go into a 5-minute recess. Discussion? Mr. Martin?
Really, it's just gnawing at me, the previous ruling on the ordinance that we had.
But do you want to go into the recess first, or is that the reason for the
The
recess?
reason for the recess. So the question becomes, we all know that something passed by emergency has to pass by a supermajority, but we weren't passing the actual ordinance. We were just doing a reading, and the question is, can you have a reading and the passage be separate? If we were passing that ordinance, it would require a majority. So I would like to take that time to look at our council rules to see if it indeed treats the readings different than the actual passages of the ordinance, if that makes sense.
I think it's worthy of a 5-minute recess. The motion is to go into a 5-minute recess. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts? Yay. Mr. Cutler?
Yay.
Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. Northland?
Yay.
Mr. Rob?
Okay. Motion passes, 8 o'clock. We're in recess.
What's not 5,705? 570519, 5705 5705. Lawyers speak.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No, I just got it. Yeah.
So like, we're just brought it up for reading.
Pass the first reading.
Sure.
Guess that's the question.
660. Joe was saying all along. Yeah. That is not the law.
Well, I can't answer that question. Here, but,
Yes.
Oh, they're
three
missing.
of you are gonna fail it anyway, so if you fail, then just bring it back on. My request is the same to do.
Just a shorter, that was for, waivers up at a tree.
Oh, so charter,
I'm not as young as I used to be, or.
Well, Sam, the systems that they're created.
The charter,
I'll say
clear,
that.
inside, makes sense if we set the rules for.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's really, you make the decision. So if you make the decision and we abide by it, then the rules were followed.
It's like, it's like a special waiver, it's written in our charter, it says basically.
That's fine. I'm just making sure that I want,
No, it's still gonna
pay the bill because
in spite of,
if you have it,
so
say,
like next
By
meeting.
any week, you can call.
Or you can bring it back on to the next meeting if you
I
want.
don't.
I think so, point of order, and then you can rule on
Yeah,
the order.
on Wednesday, so I don't, but just, I thought.
It's just what happened. It was a blue form at the beginning of the year.
Okay, and I filled that out.
Well,
I have problems with this.
Thank you.
well, we had, like, we were, so we were down to the office, I sat there for 3.5 days, and we're in the office, and like stacked them.
Yeah.
We went in, down to the house, that's why you got that. It worked, I guess, right? Yeah, it came through. Where did this come from? Now, you probably put it, it's probably some hundred people think, how did I get this? Yeah, we had
That's right, we had.
a box for it.
I know, this is interesting. I feel really bad for the voters. Because I didn't really
Yeah.
I know you took that and I sit down and, well, I do.
the ones that I put on there.
I sit down and look at
It's
it.
more like the 70 ordinance. Yeah, they're like charging.
I was, you know what?
I'm done reading.
Cut it down.
I don't have it. Hey, what do I owe? And she'll tell me on the phone, and I'll just check it, hand it to her.
Less than 4. Oh, okay, okay. Well, what ended up working best for you?
20 years there's law, so it's,
Now it could be
Okay.
5 days.
Go out there and look at them.
Never.
you guys get more excited.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Council comes out of recess at 8:05. Recording back on, Mr.
Yes, it is, thank you, Fred.
Mr. Martin.
Point of order, Mayor. I believe the previous ruling on ordinance number 13, 2024 as having failed the first reading was incorrect, as we weren't going for passage, we were merely passing the first reading.
Point of order is well received, so we will have this on the agenda at our next meeting for the second reading. Mr. Martin?
Mayor, I always, the first meeting in June, take a little bit of personal privilege. My wife and I celebrated our 22 years of marriage, so I'd just like to thank her for putting up with me for that long. As my fellow council members can attest, that's quite a feat in itself, so.
Congrats.
Thank you on that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Martin?
Mayor, move council adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Martin and a second by Mr. McLaughlin for adjournment. Roll call, please.
Mr. Roberts? Mr. Cutler? Mr. Martin?
Yay.
Mr. McLaughlin? Mr. Rob?
Yay.
Council is adjourned at 8:06. Okay.